Today, the world will lose an invaluable break on nuclear war. That's the bleak conclusion by UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, talking about the end of the INF Treaty. The Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, which expires today, has stopped Russia and the US deploying nuclear warheads in Europe for the last 30 years. But the United States is set to pull out of that today, arguing that it needs to develop its own nuclear warheads to deter Russia. Moscow says it remains fully compliant with the INF Treaty, which was negotiated by Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev. Terry Schultz is a journalist who's been following this story closely and joins me now. Morning to you. The US says it needs to deter Russia. What does it actually mean by that?
The United States says that since Russia has been in violation of this treaty for so long and says that Russia has developed missiles that go beyond the range that are allowed under the treaty, that now it's dangerous for everyone, dangerous for the European allies who are on the front line of anything Russia would launch. And so it says it can no longer be constrained by this treaty either. The other aspect of this is that the U.S. points out that China is advancing very rapidly and has no treaties whatsoever limiting its nuclear development. So what the U.S. has said is that since Russia has already basically made the treaty useless, it would like a larger treaty with more countries so that there could be a more multilateral nuclear framework that would limit the development of nuclear weapons.
Russia claims it's been fully compliant with the treaty. Would you agree with that?
Well, I don't have a personal opinion, but I've certainly been speaking over the years of allegations with many officials, including those who have seen U.S. evidence. And it took years, I should say, that here at NATO, it took years to convince the Europeans decisively that Russia was violating the treaty. The U.S. showed increasingly refined imagery and other proof that this was happening. And the Europeans went out and did some of their own research. And once they were convinced, and this was only last year, the European allies came in line behind the U.S. and said, yeah, this treaty isn't working. It doesn't do any good if the U.S. isn't, if Russia isn't remaining in line with it.
So was it just a remnant from a bygone era? Should people be worried about the demise of this treaty?
Well, I think a little of both. It was a remnant of a bygone era, but a useful one. In fact, NATO continues to call it the cornerstone of nuclear deterrence in Europe, and Europeans are still very worried about this. I think many countries would be most comfortable if the United States still stayed in the INF and gave Russia more time. But that's not going to happen with Washington, certainly not with Mr. Trump's Washington. And so there's no question that the U.S. has made up its mind. And what people are really worried about now, Rosie, is the next nuclear treaty. In fact, pretty much the last one standing. And that's the New START treaty, which is due to expire next February. And in February 2021. And President Trump is coming under a lot of pressure to keep that treaty limiting nuclear warheads. And I mean, we can all just hope that efforts to create a multilateral framework for limiting nuclear weapons works. But there's not much optimism on the horizon at this moment.
Terry Schultz, thank you for that analysis.